Hello. Wow. Thank you for coming. Welcome to my live. It's only me tonight because Gwen is overworked and having some health issues. Nothing too severe. She's just got some chronic health issues that are flaring up. So, apologies. I know we love Gwen and she'll be missed. Um, this is my first live by myself. So, can't guarantee the quality. I can't guarantee the quality of any of these, but even less now. Also, I'm recovering from a cold myself, so keep your expectations low. That's the secret to happiness. Low expectations. And I'm gonna ask you, hey Tanya, please, I'm sorry, Tanya, that Gwen isn't here. Um, she's a little bit sick. So please say things in the chat. So this is a conversation, so I'm not just talking to myself. I mean, I can and I will, but it'll be more fun for everyone if it's a conversation. So let's comment. Let's add our thoughts, if you would. But while we decide what to talk about, I had put together a little list of topics to talk about with Gwen. So I'm just going to talk about them with y'all until someone brings up something more interesting to talk about. So yeah, I thought I was just kind of going through Drudge Report as one does and saw that South Park is going to be trolling our DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, and I was thinking about it, and I'm like, sorry, has Trump hired any like not super conventionally attractive women? I'm trying like I could, and please let me know in the chat if you can think of any, but I haven't been able to, and I just thought that was interesting. And I wondered if the fact that she, is I believe a former beauty queen, certainly a very attractive woman, in my opinion, um, whether that's going to come into the, the trolling. And I was thinking about how like women are held to a double standard with regard to our looks, but also like, I think there's an extent to which women are held to a higher standard, or I don't even know if I think it is a higher standard. It's a different standard that ends up being a higher standard, I think. I think there's an extent to which women in leadership are expected to, and there's been studies about this, like especially in the corporate world. Tanya says, no, Madeleine Albright's in his administration. Matt, I haven't heard that name in years. Okay, I'm looking her up just to confirm. Wow. Well, she's supposed to be dead, so mean, she's probably contributing as much as the average cabinet member, but uh, but yeah, like women have to have all of the characteristics of a leader, of course, but then in addition, women have to meet the standards of femininity, which are often, I don't know if I would say opposed to the qualities that we tend to want to see in a leader, but there's certainly some tension there where like women are socialized to be self-sacrificing, for example. And you could say, well, leaders should be self-sacrificing too, but it's like, but do we really expect them to be? And I would say the fact that like Simon Sinek rose to international fame and success with a book called Leaders Eat Last, which is bad. I'm sorry. It was bad. I had to read it for one of my jobs and I did not enjoy it. Um, uh, you know, because Leaders Eat Last is not the default. That's, he was supposed to be telling us something, like you don't write a nonfiction book called The Sky is Blue. Like that doesn't work. So anyway, likable, self-sacrificing, women are supposed to be compassionate, which again are, these are not bad qualities for a leader to have, but they're not necessarily the qualities we associate with leadership. These aren't necessarily the qualities that we expect leaders to have. Hmm. And yeah, so anyway, those are some of the thoughts that I had on Kristi Noem, to who wrote a memoir in which she killed her dog. I thought that was so, like, it's an interesting thing for her to do, but it was a really interesting thing to me for her to write about, and I just wonder about, like, how cynical was it? Was it literally like, "Okay, I know journalists will cover this, and if the more journalists that cover the book, the more sales I'm gonna get?" Was it, am I just so disconnected from the average Republican voter that I didn't understand that this is gonna win her fans? Was it just a miscalculation? Hard to know. Um, Matt says, "Sorry, start with why. Was the Golden Circle bad though?" Oh, for Simon Sinek? I don't know if I read those books, to be honest. I think I did. I think I read Start with Why, and I thought it was fine. Could have been an article. Could have been a good article. It's probably didn't deserve a book. I think that's what I thought. Who knows? We'll go with that. Oh man. Okay. And I'll admit I didn't read these articles. I guess I could. Maybe I should. But I saw inside the research. It just says inside resurgence, but it's inside the resurgence of ex-gay conversion therapy. Oh, I mean, I have a lot to say about this. I mean, obviously, it reminds me of my Moral Panics 101 post where I'm talking about, like, why right-wing authoritarians care about queers. There's nothing, like, obvious there. Like, you wanna be a right-wing authoritarian, who cares who's having sex with who? Or especially, like, I could see it in a blood and soil way where you'd wanna control reproduction. But, like, famously, queer sex is not super reproductive, so why be concerned with that particularly? Especially because, like, I don't know, if the argument was that, like, which is literally what I heard growing up, and, like, I don't know if it was exactly in church or it was, like, the right-wing ecosystem or what, but, like, the argument was that, like, "Hey, Mike, my friend Mike Tanner is here, and I love him, and you should read his work." Um, but, like, why do people care about gays? Oh, yeah, the argument was that, like, if we don't stigmatize/criminalize queer sex, then, and this came up, I don't actually remember if this was still a thing. I mean, it certainly wasn't as much a thing in my circles because I wasn't, like, going to church at this time when gay marriage was really being debated, but yeah, like in the 90s and early 2000s, it was, if we let gay people be gay openly, if we don't stigmatize it or criminalize it, then, like, a lot of people, particularly men, will be gay. That was really like the argument that, like, it's got to be tamped down, or it's going to be like an epidemic. And you know, looking back, it's like, you're really telling on yourself there if you really think that, like, are you saying that the stigma, I just drooled a little bit. Sorry. Are you really saying the stigma is the only thing keeping you from having gay sex? Which, in which case, like, fine. I don't have a problem with that, but, like, I guess that would be really painful to, I mean, it was for me to be queer and to believe that it was, that if I gave into temptation, I would I would risk spending an eternity in hell, or at least make God mad at me and die sooner. That was rough, but I don't know. People are just telling on themselves with that one, I feel like. So anyway, yeah, it's a moral panic driven by the I think right wing, particularly, like, reactionary authoritarian need to identify scapegoats, because if you don't identify scapegoats, then the people are like, well, why does my life suck? Like, why am I not where I want to be in life? And, oh, drunk Wisconsin, what's up? Um, why am I not where I want to be? And so, it's not going to benefit the people in power, newly or oldly, to, the populists say it's the elites, the existing elites, uh, and the queers and the minorities. um, because they they separate who they consider to be the elites and not. Like, somehow Josh Hawley is a man of the people, despite the fact that he literally comes from money and graduated from, I believe, Yale, uh, some Ivy League law school. No, he's not elite. JD Vance, he's a man of the people, despite the fact that he and his wife graduated from Ivy League law schools. Anywhoods, so that's a thing. But I wanted to point out, I saw two things recently that I enjoyed about this topic between like misogyny and queerphobia and right wing authoritarianism. And one is, what is the connection between the alt right and violent misogyny? It's an interview on YouTube, and I'd never heard of either of the women in the video, but the interviewee was Dr. Cynthia Miller Idris, who just wrote a book called Man Up that I intend to check out. She was a researcher who focused on right wing extremism, I believe, or authoritarianism in general, and then kept getting asked about gender, and she was like, "I don't know anything about it. This is not what I study." And then finally hit a tipping point, and she's like, "Okay, let me look into it." And she got really into it and wrote a whole book about it. And then I never heard of this creator either, but he made a video called "The New Aesthetics of Fascism." His name is just Ben on YouTube, and I really enjoyed that. It was a good use of the platform, like, because he had all these examples of like actual imagery, which I enjoyed. And it goes into the misogyny angle as well. Hey, Emma. Um, if y'all just joined, I'm sorry that my co-host Gwen isn't here and I didn't have a guest lined up. So please comment so we can have a conversation, or I'll just keep talking about the topics that I had picked out to talk about with Gwen. She's fine. She's having some chronic health stuff. Redneck recession hits working class hardest. That's another Drudge Report headline that I wrote down, and I just wanted to connect that to a few things that I had, little facts that I'd squirreled away in my Google Drive maze of docs with facts organized into categories and subcategories. Very normal. So there's a 2025 poll in which 83% of young men who voted for Trump considered marriage to be important to them, which was 19 points above the average. And so the average here, I believe, was young men generally. So of the cohort of young men in 2025 who they polled, young men who voted for Trump were 19 points more likely to say Trump, marriage was important to them. And I just thought that was really, I don't know, I have a theory. Okay, let me say. The other factoid is Brad Wilcox, who's definitely more of a conservative than I am, said employment difficulties among less educated men are a big reason marriage rates are lower among the working class than among college graduates. And this is just like pretty commonly accepted that there's a very strong link between employment. There's a strong link between employment and marriage. It's much stronger for men than for women. Like, being employed very strongly predicts whether a man is married. It more weakly predicts whether a woman is married. So basically, like, my theory is, and I think a lot of people's theory increasingly, is that young men are voting for Trump in large part because they are the kind of person who wants to get married. And like, most people want to get married, but it's getting married is differing levels of importance to different people, obviously. And well, not obviously, but intuitively that seems true to me, and I've seen data that would indicate it. Maybe the differences aren't, I mean, in this case, it's 19 points is pretty big. This is one of the, I think that's why I wrote it down, because it's one of the larger gaps I've seen. But anyway, different people value getting married at different rates. I think that there is a large cohort of young men who are not getting married, and not because they don't wanna get married, because they can't. Because they're not either they're not employed, or they are employed, but their employment is too precarious, low wage, unpredictable schedules, requires them to travel, like, whatever it is, like, their employment either isn't enough or isn't the right kind that to make them, attractive as a marriage partner. And if you're like, "Well, why does it matter what their employment is?" Well, unfortunately, in 2025, everyone still wants, a male breadwinner, like, not necessarily to be the family's only income, but everybody pretty much wants a husband who earns the most of the money, earns enough money for the household to function, whether or not the woman works, which I think is reasonable. As I've said before, you get pregnant, you may go on bed rest, you may not be able to work, so it makes sense to prefer a husband who can handle the financial burden. Biology is real. So anyway, I've gone so yeah, I think that this 19-point gap makes a certain amount of sense. Like, if you're the kind of person who really wants to get married, you're the kind of person who, due to mostly economic factors, is not able to. It's also telling that the dip in the marriage rate is happening, over the past 40 years, has happened exclusively among people in the bottom half in terms of income and education, which is also the majority of Trump voters. So you've got a lot of people who want to get married, a lot of people can't, a lot of people who want to blame, feminism, global trade, immigration for the fact that they can't um, be a breadwinner and get married. And so I really think that's a huge underrated factor in support for Trump and right-wing authoritarianism and right populism overall. Uh, then I was going to talk about prosecutor investigating alleged fake topless video of Indiana lawmaker's wife. I love to tell this story, but I had an ex who told me one time we'd broken up, but we were still friends. I thought about revenge porning you, but I knew you wouldn't care. And this is before I I put my own titties on the internet. Um, and I was like, "Thank you. I'm so flattered. You know me. You see me. That would be embarrassing for you, not me." That's how I feel about revenge. Like, non-consensual porn, which, first of all, it's, I don't know, non-consensual sexual imagery. Um, That's embarrassing for the sharer. Like, I don't understand why. I do understand why it's embarrassing, because we stigmatize sex and we hate women and we're all puritanical, yucky about it. But it doesn't actually make sense that any kind of pornography would be embarrassing. But especially if if you're not trying to make porn, if someone just like does it to you, that is embarrassing for them, not you. But you know, and I think that, like, with the whole um deep fake, it's like it's even more of a get out of jail free card. It's like, even if it's real, you can be like, no, it's a deep fake. That's not my butthole. My butthole, it looks totally different than that. So I don't know. I really cannot get my panties in a twist about deep fake porn. I I literally, this is a couple of years ago, but I was like, I wish I could get a deep fake to just make the porn people want to see of me without me having to do it. Like, I don't do butt stuff in my pornography. I have irritable bowel syndrome, and I'm like, well, if somebody wants to see that, like, I would love. I mean, anyone can, and I don't have to take a cut out of it, unfortunately. But like, if I could get paid, if somebody can make a deep fake of me getting pounded in the butt, and then I get paid for it, like I did it, incredible. That would be ideal. Um, but I have not figured out how to do that. hit me up if you have leads. Um, so those are my thoughts about deepfakes. But then in terms of lawmakers' wives, I was thinking about Casey DeSantis and how she like apparently started this charity and then like pocketed all the money. And it barely made it. Like I think there was like a few news articles about it, and it wasn't even about that. I literally learned about that in an article about something totally different. So I'm like, this it's so messed up in our society that like a deep fake porn is going to make news, but like actual corruption that matters, like when a lawmaker's wife does something that like has a material impact on other people, that's in one way or another, um, we don't care, and that's just so discouraging and annoying, and just highlights like if you say like, what are the harms of sexual stigma? That wouldn't even be on my list, right? Because it's not even in the top 20, but it's, like, among them, right? That it sucks all the attention and oxygen away from things that actually matter, which is really frustrating. Um, Another headline is "More sex toys thrown onto the court at WNBA game." I feel like this is such a, Rorschach Rorschach? I don't know how to say that, ink blot test of, like, what does it mean? Like, is it like flowers or underwear? Or are they, trolling? Like, is it harassment? Like, what is it? I could just read the article, but I think it's more interesting to think through, like, we should do a poll, we should take bets, like, is it positive or negative? What does it mean? Could be anything. Um, and then Jill, uh, Philo Philov Philippic Philippic, uh, Filipovic. No, I'm sorry. You don't come here for the excellent pronunciations. Wrote Millennial Feminism Saved Marriage, so what? And I think okay, so let me just read the little portion I quoted and then we'll discuss. Thanks to better employment prospects, college educated men are more secure in their role as masculine providers and don't find traditional female labor, housework, and childcare to be as much of a challenge to their status and masculine identity. All of this, greater financial stability, the political tendency toward equality, the money to buy equality if you aren't making it at home, gives a boost to marriages between college educated people. I mean, like I said, the data I've seen indicated that the marriage rate among college educated people is steady. So, um, I think all that's true. College educated men are more secure in their role as masculine providers and don't find female labor emasculating. But I don't think that's a change. Um, I think that's two things. I think it's who graduates from college and how masculinity works with breadwinning. So I think the kind of man who graduates from college always was more likely to be um, less worried about housework being emasculating. People who graduate from college tend to be less sexist than people who don't, and more feminist. And so there's all that. Why exactly that is, I'm not really sure. Could be college appeals to men who tend to be more feminine. There's, you know, we code um, the ability to sit down, shut up, and work diligently at a task for hours, even if it's boring. Like girls are socialized to do that more than boys. Girls may have a biological advantage as well. But anyway, so there's that. But also, I think that I think domestic labor is a masculinity threat to most men. It's just that men who have college degrees are much more likely to be in the top half of income, and essentially they can withstand the threat. Like they get to be breadwinners. They get to earn the majority of their household's income, generally speaking. And so, when you're secure on your platform, people can throw vegetables at you and you can just glance, whatever. But when you're already, and there's data to show this, when you're already threatened. First of all, there's data to show that breadwinning is like the thing in American culture. Like when you really break it down, when you're like, what does it mean to be a man in America? It means to be your family's breadwinner. So men who don't have that, their masculinity is extremely threatened anyway. So then when you add anything else to the threat, first of all, men, generally speaking, respond very poorly to masculinity threats, but men whose masculinity is already threatened respond even more poorly, which is part of why men who are not employed at all, husbands who are not employed at all do less housework and childcare than husbands who are fully employed, because their masculinity is already threatened and they can't withstand the threat of washing a dish. And also, the kind of person who is a family's breadwinner is, generally speaking, just a more well-adjusted, less sexist person than the kind of person who is not employed. So that also plays a role. So I don't think that anything has really changed in the top half, except that men generally, I think this is mostly driven by changes in the top half. Husbands in general, on average, are doing more housework and childcare than they have in the past. But it's like 20%. I know it's not like a huge change, especially not, it's not like, commensurate with how things are a little more fair, but they're still very far from fair in terms of like hours spent working outside the home to hours spent working inside the home. It's still very, very unfavorable to wives, particularly mothers. But so that's changed a little bit, but I don't think it explains marriage rates. I think what explains marriage rates is what's going on in the bottom half, which is men are not doing anywhere near enough childcare and domestic labor to make up for the income they're not bringing in to the household. Jeff Long, I would much rather throw a sex toy than my underwear. I love those athletes and the joy of watching them be amazing, but flowers are right there. I feel like a sex toy would go farther than my underwear. I feel like if I tried to throw my underwear, just kind of go 2 feet in front of me and then float down. But that's me. All right. Well, that's all I mean, I also had the story that I published today, which I haven't really promoted. I need to make a video and like do my social media about my post today. I haven't yet, so I can practice now. It's called How to Become a Man of Integrity. It's the first thing I was able to write since I got sick. And I don't know, it's funny because like I kind of don't like the self-help category. I think a lot of it is not very good. It's hard to do well. It's like it's either too specific to be applicable to me, or it's so broadly applicable that it's been said a million times already. And then I hate the whole, like, people who are smart. The worst was Josh Hawley. The fact that Josh Hawley wrote a self-help book grinds my fucking gears, because it's like, in general, I think we need to spend more time thinking about the systems, fixing the systems that oppress people, and less time telling people how to navigate broken systems. Like, let's just, like, stop making it unnecessarily hard for the average person to benefit the people who are already benefiting. Um, so it's like, if you're smart enough to write good self-help, maybe you should write policy. But then again, okay, I've written a lot of more policy than your average person. And it's like, for most people, it's not a good use of time for them to read about policy, because most people can't do anything about policy. Most people can only help themselves, at best. And so, the more mass your audience, I think probably the greater the ROI on writing self-help than policy. But you're Josh Hawley. You're not the average person. I mean, I get that Josh Hawley is writing for a mass audience, or was writing for a mass audience with this book, Manhood. But I want my senator to focus on removing the barriers to my advancement. I do not want my senator writing self-help. That is not a good use of senatorial time or talent or position. Fucking burn my ass. It was also bad. I mean, it wasn't totally bad ideas, but it was very dumb, most of it. And but yeah, so but I don't know. Most of this post is self-help, if you did, like, a word count. So it's cultural commentary, um, and self-help. And I don't know, I liked writing it. I think it feels good to spend a lot of money and time going to therapy and meditating and doing psychedelics, and I feel like I've come across some ideas and perspectives that have been helpful to me, and so it feels good to share them. And I think that at the end of the day, I have a limited capacity to change policy, unfortunately, but I can I can give people another way to look at their own patterns and problems. And so I don't feel bad about doing that. And that feels fine. I think I think you can do self-help in a way that's not like it's all your responsibility. That's definitely my perspective. You know, I've done things a little bit differently, and that's helped me. Also, I want the systems to change. Um John Fox said, "Have any advice for folks who are new liberals on how to work well with DSA folks to fight against autocracy?" That's a good question. I I really only, as far as I can remember, only interacted with DSA folks when I lived in San Francisco, online, and that was not a good experience. They did not like me. Um, I didn't pay much attention to them, to be honest. In terms of Huntsville, though, it's been, very different. Like, I joined the national DSA thing. I give them $5 a month, and I'm not a socialist. But, like, we have an active chapter, Huntsville DSA, North Alabama DSA, and, you know, for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's like there aren't enough. I don't even consider myself, like, on the left or progressive necessarily, and I'm sure many lefties and progressives would agree with me, have agreed with me loudly, like the DSA people in San Francisco, but I'm not on the right. And so I'm not a conservative and I'm not on the right and I'm not an authoritarian. I'm a liberal. That's how I self-describe. I'm a liberal. I'm a new liberal. And so in Huntsville, it's like there aren't enough of us to be picky. Like there are people even here who have managed to make infighting like their personal hobby and brand, which is extra annoying and frustrating. But much more here, it seems like people are just like, okay, there aren't enough of us to do circular firing squads. Like we need to get along just to have any hope, just to even have friends, much less get anything accomplished. And so I think it's pretty strongly contextual in terms of the DSA. I think the different chapters are very different, seemingly. And so I think, you know, it depends on where you live and who's in charge, probably. And the other thing I would say, though, just generally speaking, what I've noticed is that I feel like having gone to these meetings of many different kinds of organizations, kind of around politics in Huntsville, it's a lot of people who are just there in leadership because no one else has stepped up. And sometimes, too often, frustratingly often, people just like to be in charge of things. People people want to be in charge of things more than they want to do whatever their organization is ostensibly supposed to do. And that really frustrates me, especially when it's something like a party apparatus where I can't just if you want to be like head poobah of the local tennis organization, and I don't like the job you're doing, I'll just start a different tennis organization, no problem. But when it's the local party, um, I can't just make another local Democratic Party. I don't think. I should look into it. But anyway, my point is just do a hostile or friendly takeover. It's probably easier than you think if they're not going to work with you. How can we work toward positive policies? Oh man, if I knew, I would be a New York Times bestseller. I guarantee, or some kind of bestseller, Gumroad maybe. But if I knew, you would know. I would be telling you. I wish I knew. I feel like I was just telling my therapist this in terms of the self-help thing that my friend Nick said to me one time, and I was like, I think this is too categorical, but I think he was absolutely directionally right. He's like, we, meaning like the left, the right, whatever, people who care about politics, we do not lack for good policy ideas. Like we have a lot of good policy ideas. And could we use more? Could they be better? Sure. But in terms of supply versus demand, we're oversupplied with ideas for policies that would be better than what we have now. What we are starved of, we are absolutely demand vastly exceeds supply, is executable theories of how to get those policies implemented. That was the main criticism, the main valid criticism, I think, of abundance, the book and the movement. It's like permitting reform, getting rid of zoning, funding basic research. Like these are good ideas. They would help solve the problem of scarcity. That's important. We love that. Like all of the evidence we have indicates that the United States and the world would be better off if we implemented these policies post haste. How? How do you do it? How do you build the political will? How do you recruit the candidates? How do you get the candidates elected? How do you keep the candidates accountable? Like that is what we're missing. So if you're like, okay, where if I can do anything and where is my talent going to be most impactful, I think it's there. I think figuring that out. And I don't feel like I have the talent to do it. I feel like honestly at this point, it's one of those things that you really can't figure out by reading. I think you really have to just talk to people who are doing it. You have to talk to the consultants, you have to talk to the candidates, you have to talk to the campaign managers, you have to talk to the staffers, like, and be like, how does this happen? Like, actually, like, who are the players? How how do they get influence? How do we measure influence? How does it actually work? Because I hear things about like the groups um and I kind of understand it on a conceptual level, but like that's not enough. Like somebody needs to understand it on a nuts and bolts practical level. It being the status quo, how does it work now? So we can have any hope of like, okay, how could it be amended? How could it work better? What are things that well-meaning smart people could do, you know? Because it's not enough to say like, oh, it's captured by industry. The Democratic Party is captured by industry. Okay, then what do we do next? I don't know. So I think if you want to make a difference, like answering that question is the higher ROI thing to answer. It's awkward to go to a Huntsville protest event and have them quoting Marx, and I'm like, can we have a little regulated free markets as a treat? Um, yeah, I ignore it. It's whatever. It's fine. You can quote Marx if you want to. For me, it was frustrating to go to I went to, I think it was the No Kings. No, it was before the No Kings. I think it was about the Doge. It was like the first big Huntsville anti-Doge protest, which was pretty spicy because a lot of people in Huntsville work for the federal government in some way or another. And it was like 9 out of 10 speakers were represented organized labor. And I don't have anything against unions. I think unions are an important counterbalance to um, exploitative capital. Uh, I think in the United States, the employer is way empowered relative to the worker, and unions are an imperfect, collective bargaining is an imperfect um, counterweight. I would like to see employer power eroded through things like I don't think our social safety net should be set up in such a way as to help employers avoid paying their workers enough to meet the requirements for life. It's like a very large percentage of low wage workers are on assistance. If you're fully employed, you should be able to afford life without the federal government getting involved. I think that we need something like um, a public option for health insurance because the fact that losing employment means losing health insurance gives employers tremendous amounts of leverage over their workers that isn't fair or right. So those are the things that I think it's not either or, but in terms of priorities, that's where I would put the priority if I again had any influence whatsoever on which laws actually get passed. Um, and especially again in a town like Huntsville, like I don't think Raytheon's going to unionize anytime soon. Like I don't think the uh, you know, um, engineers working for missile defense are I don't think collective bargaining even makes sense for high wage white collar work. So highly where skills are extremely varied and productivity is extremely varied between workers, especially, and where workers are generally like treated well. I don't think it makes sense. So I thought that was a weird fit, but it's also like what? First of all, unions are fine. Second of all, you showed up and you had something to say, so that's fine. So, yeah, I mean, I think especially if first of all, people who are not right just need to get along better. Like, let's not fight as much about anything. It's not useful. But especially if you're in a place where there aren't enough of you, like, just ignore people talking about Marxism, or use it to find common ground. Marx is right about stuff too, of course. Um, a lot of times somebody talking about Marx, their heart's in the right place. They want people to be fed and sheltered and, you know, just find common ground there. But honestly, I've barely been leaving my house lately in terms of like local organizing. So grain of salt. When it comes to my advice, I'm very burned out on local politics since I failed to fix Huntsville's housing situation. So I don't know. I was raising money for New Futures, local shelter, and I raised some money, and I'm not done, but I'm also like taking a step back from that as well because I need to be raising money for Cathy Reisenwitz, so I'm paying my bills. um, it's hard. It's hard for me to half-ass things. Like I really like to go like balls to the wall, get it done, whatever it is, or just like change and do something else. But to just like steadily, slowly work towards something with other people, that's hard for me. But I'm working on it. I'm still on the New Futures board, so I'm contributing that way, and I'm on a few other boards as well. Um, how do you feel about those who say it is wrong for a hetero men to enjoy sexual images, videos of women in media? Not talking about pornography, but movies, TV shows, music videos. Well, you're never going to believe this, but I think they're wrong. But the thing about not pornography, I was reading. So get excited. I am writing a post right now. I don't know. I maybe you won't think this is fun, but I do. Um, I wrote a post. I did a Substack post where I was like, it's really wild to me how much of a chokehold porn has on the collective consciousness, especially in the realm of blaming it on young male malaise when gambling is a bigger problem for young men across every measurable dimension by mile. So I got a lot of attention on that post, and somebody asked me if I'd written about it, and so I decided to go ahead and like write the post. It's pretty much written. I think I've done all the research. I think I've done enough research. The answer is I'm right. um, but I was reading one academic study about porn, and they defined pornography. I love a research paper because they will. To measure something, you have to create a boundary around it. So you have to exclude certain things, and so they said it was material that showed genitals for the purpose of sexual arousal. It wasn't clear to me whether boobies counted as genitals, but I guess it doesn't matter. Um, I guess a butthole would not be a genital. It's just the butthole. Does that count? Anyway, so yeah, but I was like, so in this conception, like thotties on Instagram would not be pornography, but like, of course, men masturbate to pictures of women in their underwear and bikinis on Instagram. So, like, why? Again, my point is, I'm once again correct that these distinctions are arbitrary. And yeah, there's nothing like inherent. There's not a clear, obvious line between porn and not porn. That doesn't exist. Mm. But so for me, like, this distinction is not important. But either way, would I say wrong for hetero men to enjoy sexual images? Like, to an extent, like, I want to steel man the other side. All right. Let's say you are a woman and or a man or a non-binary person, whatever. Let's say you're a person. Imagine you're a person and you put an image of yourself on the internet, or someone puts it on the internet. And maybe you're a victim or a survivor of sexual misconduct, assault, whatever. Maybe not. Maybe you're just really prudish, and you don't like the idea of men or other people, whatever, masturbating to your image. Like, that upsets you. It's fair if you know that someone doesn't want you to do that to not tell them. That seems very reasonable, like, but I don't even know if I was go as far as to say it would be wrong to do it, even knowing they don't want you to, if they don't find out. Like, what does it matter, actually? I mean, I guess the only way to guarantee they never find out that you fapped to their image or thought about them sexually, would be to not do it. But to me, like, whatever discomfort they might feel on the off chance that they found out is less the cost of that discomfort is less than the cost of the prevention, which is telling people they're not allowed to have thoughts. That's wild to me. And there's just, like, the practical cost of, like, one of the best ways to get people to think about something is to tell them they can't, the white elephant effect. So it doesn't even work. It back this you're not allowed to think about that or think like that. It's not effective, it backfires. So the practical effect of, stigmatizing or prohibiting that doesn't seem like it would be positive. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not about that life. I think you should, and by you I mean literally everyone should be able to find certainly adult women in media sexually attractive and think about them sexually and masturbate to to that thought if that's what you want to do. I think the idea that, like, sexualization, first of all, I hate that word. I think it's very stupid. I think most people are sexual beings by default. That's just part of being a grown person for most people, not everyone, but see, they'd be like, make it's like palifying. I'm already pale. I'm already sexual. You can't sexualize me. Part of who I am. It indicates that, like, there's something shameful about being sexual, which is wrong. I don't think that that's right at all. I think that's a very pernicious idea. Or that, like, no one is capable of holding two ideas in their head at the same time, that somebody could be sexual and smart, funny, interesting, whatever, which is, like, so weird and false. Like, most people see most other people as full humans and can recognize that you can be sexy and smart, and actually being smart makes you sexier, being funny makes you sexier, all else equal. Like, I don't know who sees a pair of titties or a cleavage or an underboob or an ankle and is just like, not a human anymore. That's a disembodied part to me now. Who does that? First of all. And then second of all, no doubt that person exists because all kinds of people exist. Why are we why are we acting as if that's normal? Like, why are we acting as if that's default? Why are we acting as if that's even common? And recognizing that it's probably rare and certainly defective, why would we organize all of our social expectations around a rare defective weirdo in our imaginations? Like, that is so wild. Like, it just, I don't know. To me, like, no offense, like, I'm not trying to beat up on you by any stretch of the imagination. And I know, like, you didn't make this up. A lot of this is, like, part of you're more normal than I am to ask it. But, like, when you stop to think about it, it's totally insane that there would be any problem. And I guess the other way to straw man it would be like, you know, I would feel unsafe. Like, if I knew that you were masturbating to pictures of my headshot, that would make me feel unsafe. But I think that's much more a function of, like, the kind of person who's going to go out of their way to tell you, like, "I've been masturbating to your headshot." Well, you may be unsafe from that person. That sounds like a weirdo who wants to make you feel some kind of way. So it's not the masturbating that's the problem, it's the telling you. I think we need to separate those things. Um, I'm angry if people aren't masturbating to my imagery. Like, if you're not masturbating furiously right now, I'm offended. So that's how I feel about it. But like I said, I'm the weird one in this conversation. I know that. There must be a distinction for the Alabama Department of Revenue to send tax bills. I don't understand. I'm sorry. Tell me more. Um, what is your deal? My cat is a lot right now. What else did I say? Yeah, I was much more in my How to Become a Man of Integrity today's post. I was a lot more confident about the parts that are about me than the beginning part, which is about men. I don't. That's a lot of why I write about men is that I am a lot less. I have a lot more questions. I have a lot less certainty about confidence about like how what the male experience is like. Not that I feel like I understand the female experience. I'm one lady and a weird one at that. But there are things I understand about being female, certainly being socialized female, that, I just understand from having experienced these things that I don't know about being male. So it's more interesting to me to think about and write about these days. And so I'm like positing that I think the pressure on men is different than the pressure on women. Like the way that what's expected of us differs between men and women, and that what's expected of men more than women is it's not even like so much what's expected, it's how much it's expected. Like I think men and women are expected to produce and be competent and um keep their word and yada yada. I think the main difference between not the main, but the I don't even think I articulated this very well at all, which is why I'm not as confident of it. But like, I think there's an extent to which, if you're a woman in the United States in 2025, you are expected to do X, Y, and Z. But if you don't, it's fine, more or less. Like, not that there's no social sanction, stigma, punishment for failing to do X, Y, and Z. But if you're a man and you fail to do X, Y, and Z, I think there's an extent to which you are worthless in a way that's not true of women. I think that there's an extent to which a man has to earn his right to exist. A man has to like justify his existence through his performance of X, Y, and Z. That's not true of women. And so, yes, the pressures are different, but the level of pressure is even more different in a way that I think helps explain why men kill themselves at such higher rates than women, for example. Why, when men lose their jobs, it's this huge deal in a way that it's not when women lose their jobs. Um, why we talk about like excess men in a way that we don't really talk about excess women. I think there's an extent to which like a lot of men are outside the labor force completely because they don't feel like the jobs that they could get would be enough to justify their existence, certainly to get them married. And so, if I can't even feel like a man, like a person who deserves to exist and get me a wife, and like why bother getting out of bed in the morning? You can like see that in the data. Um yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I do feel pretty confident that like the pressure on men to perform masculinity is greater than the pressure on women to perform femininity, and the punishments that we mete out to men who perform femininity are greater than the punishments we mete out to women who perform masculinity. Like that I'm pretty confident about. But this idea that like men have to earn their existence, that's I'm not as confident about that, but I do have an intuition that that's true. And I think part of it is probably biological, that women are just more um, important to the survival of the species on an individual basis, even if they don't do anything, even if we don't do anything, than men are on an individual basis. Um, but I think it's also like pretty like post-industrial capitalism as well, like telling men like you've got to be a man, and being a man means contributing financially, capitalistically. And if you don't do that, you're worthless. Like capitalism, I feel like isn't big on like you are a worthy being of light and love who deserves a reasonable standard of living because you exist, whether you're male or female. But I think if you're female, it's it's more like that. I mean, I think the fact that like, and a lot of this again is goes back to biology. Most single parents are women. So, like, when you look at the, division of aid, it's extremely gender skewed. Like, men receive way less aid than women do, or, like, of the dollars that go to aid, a much, much larger proportion of those dollars go to women than men. Again, that has a lot to do with the fact that a very large portion of aid goes to mothers, but, that doesn't explain all of it. I think I think the fact that, like, women deserve to exist for existing, and men deserve to exist if they prove that they deserve to exist. Like, I think that is part of it. So there's that. Porn versus non-porn with our new tax. Oh, do we have a porn tax? HB 164. I'm gonna have to look that up. That's annoying. Oh, right. Public health crisis caused by pornography. Oh man, I started reading pornog porn wars, pornography wars again recently, and, it was so interesting. I think it was, like, President Nixon, he either, like, put the commission together or put a commission together to reevaluate the earlier commission's findings, but there was an actual commission put together at the federal level to study whether and to what extent pornography was a threat to public health, and they could not find compelling evidence that it was a threat to public health. Um, and this was before the internet, but all of the evidence since then indicates that it hasn't really changed. Like, certainly when it comes to like violence, as pornography moved online, rates of violence went off a cliff, dropped off a cliff. So certainly not a public health crisis in terms of violence against anyone. I think you can find studies showing that for a proportion of the population, porn is associated with like loneliness, joblessness, um, what else? Not being in a relationship. But on average, the either it doesn't hold true. So, like, the best predictor of watching pornography is not like it's not that watching pornography makes people single, like, people in relationships and single people both watch porn. I don't think it's really, like, predictive. The thing that much better the thing that best predicts pornography watching, as far as I can tell the last time I looked, was libido. People who are hornier are more likely to look at porn, perhaps not shockingly. Um, yeah, I just don't see any evidence for I mean, there's anecdotal evidence that there's, like, a, an uptick in incidents of erectile dysfunction in young men, which people are trying to blame on porn, but I tried to find evidence about this and, like, there isn't there isn't empirical evidence that the prevalence of erectile dysfunction is higher in young men, and, yeah, there's been a lot of young men are, like, getting erectile dysfunction drugs, but it's not clear that those men actually have erectile dysfunction. I think I mean, I know men who get the drugs because they want to have longer, stronger erections or want to have more control over, they're like, I have a date, I want to make sure I get an erection. I think to the extent that erectile dysfunction is a problem in young men, it has to do with them being in poor health and having anxiety. um, and, I'm not saying it's not possible that pornography is causing erectile dysfunction in some men. I think you can get desensitized both, like, from a visual stimulation perspective and from a manual stimulation perspective. And so for those men, and maybe for a lot of men, like, taking a break from porn or watching different porn or masturbating differently could help with real life erections. Anecdotally, I've heard that that's been true for a lot of men, and I think that's great. Do that, but that doesn't mean that pornography is causing a crisis of erectile dysfunction among young men, which is the claim. Like, that's what you would need to show just to bolster the claim that porn is a public health crisis, and the evidence is not there to make that claim. I've looked. So you got erectile dysfunction, singleness. There's no causal relationship between pornography use and being single. Same for loneliness, same for joblessness. Now, there is a connection between, like, men who are already single and lonely and jobless are more likely to spend a lot of time watching porn. But, like, obviously, the causal direction is in the, okay, these things are why I have a lot of time and I'm filling more, I'm filling some portion of that time with pornography, not that pornography caused the joblessness. Like, how would that even work? I mean, I don't know. I do think there's an extent to which men used to go to work doing jobs they really didn't want to do because what else are you going to do? But probably more, their parents either couldn't afford to or weren't going to let them masturbate in their bedrooms as 20-year-olds. Um, so I don't know if this is, like, a function of I for all this, like, public health crisis stuff, age verification and making sure teenagers aren't accessing porn and making sure that pornography isn't a teenagers only tool for sex education. It just seems like fucking parent your kids. Do your job, parent. I understand you don't want to, but, like, I don't want to either. That's why I didn't have them. But if you're gonna have them, then do it. Don't make the state or federal government, like, do your job for you. That doesn't work well, and it's not going to work well. Like, first of all, again, porn is not a public health crisis. It's not a public health. It's not even a threat to public health. Like, it's neither here nor there to public health. But even if it were, banning it or regulating it or taxing it or whatever the fuck they want to do is not the solution. It's just going to push. Some people will probably either use less porn or stop looking at it, but the people you most need to worry about, frankly, are going to continue to look at it. They're just going to look at stuff that is created and hosted overseas where they don't have to obey US laws and that they can access using VPNs. And so if you look at pornography if you look at pornography made by people who hewed to US laws, it's necessarily it necessarily involves people who are over 18. Section 2256, I think, requires that all porn producers who comply with US law have and maintain and can produce the paperwork to prove that the performers are adults. You know, there are other laws, payment processing restriction. Like there's all kinds of stuff that helps to ensure that what you see is produced consensually. But when you get outside of that, there's no it's anything goes, and pushing people into that world because they can't safely if you make it equally easy to if you make it easier to access or equally easy to access porn made by people who are not caring about being in compliance with US law, that's not an improvement. That's not a world you want to see, and that is the world that we are entering as we stigmatize and criminalize and tax and attack, pornography, whatever we're considering pornography. And I hate it. Hate it. No, I was writing about overcommitment and how I feel like I've helped increase my own sense of personal integrity. And the first thing I did, and I really feel like therapy was really essential to me in this and really helpful to me in this, is really working on forgiving myself when I fail to demonstrate integrity, when I make a commitment that I don't follow through on, to just say, this doesn't mean I'm a horrible person. It doesn't mean I'm a person who has no integrity. I made a mistake. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm not going to blame others. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. And when I forgive myself, it disincentivizes me from ignoring it or reframing it as not a mistake or finding excuses that, oh, I couldn't have done any better because of X, Y, and Z. It wasn't my fault. Blaming myself, beating myself up, that is what makes me want to do all that. But when I forgive myself, then why not admit my mistake if I'm going to forgive myself? And I've found that helpful. And then similarly, when I do meet a commitment, and this is honestly harder for me. I think forgiving myself was harder in a way because I think what has helped with that is just somebody wrote something recently about Western shame versus Eastern shame. And I was like, I'm not going to like this, but let me just read it. But I loved it. And it was about how Western shame is more about I am a bad person, and Eastern shame is more about I hurt my community. And what it reminded me of is the difference between the way I understand guilt and shame. To me, shame is I am bad, and guilt is I did a bad thing. That's why I am so anti-shame and have mixed feelings about guilt. But I think anything where you're saying I am a bad person, is bad, and I think it's been really, really detrimental to me personally, and it took me a lot of therapy to even see that this was true and to contemplate an alternative, but I think a lot of I think evangelical Christianity really fucked me up here, is like, the teaching is you are a sinful person. You are a sinner in need of a savior. That was what I understood about myself. It was evil and corrupt base. I was born that way, and that I needed to be redeemed. I needed the blood of the Redeemer to make me worthy of being in God's sight, to join him in his kingdom for all eternity. And I think especially like post Christianity, it's like, okay, am and I think, like I said, I couldn't even really see it, but I think at core, what I really struggled with, what I still struggle with, is like, am I a bad person? Am I a bad person? Do I have to do all this stuff, all this shaming myself when I make mistakes, all this beating myself up, all this work to do good things and to be a positive force in the world, and to, all this anxiety about like my relationships? Am I positive to the people around me? Should I distance myself from people so I don't hurt them? Like, all this comes down to, or I think one of the things that is core to these things is that fear that I am a bad person at my core. And I remember my therapist was like, what if you and everyone else is good at their core? What if you're fundamentally a being of light and love? And I was like, oh my God, that sounds like because I met him in San Francisco, and I'm like, that sounds like such woo bullshit. Like, I hate it. But I was like, you know what? I'm not having a good time. I'm paying you a lot of money. Let me just consider the possibility that this is true. And it has been extremely helpful. Like, obviously, it's not a thing I can prove one way or another, but I think it's a much more helpful thing to believe. And it sounds like the kind of thing that would cause people to be solipsistic and to be lazy and to like lean back and be like, well, I don't have to do anything. Like, I'm a being of light and love. Like, everybody's just lucky that I exist. You know, whatever I do, I'm still good. That was my first thought. Like, that's the behavior that leads to. But I think the opposite is actually true. That like, the more that I think of myself as a fundamentally good person, the more I do good things, if for no other reason than good behavior comports with my image of myself, and bad behavior comports with my image of myself as a bad person. So just to prevent the cognitive dissonance of acting one way while seeing myself a different way, I'm more likely to do good things. And so like, that's kind of the insight behind this whole post, is that the more you see yourself as someone who is a being of light and love, or someone who keeps their commitments, or someone who whatever, the more likely you are to actually do those behaviors. And that's been really helpful to me. So yeah, so like, I believing I'm a being of light and love at my core has helped me forgive myself when I act like I'm not a being of light and love. And um and then I've tried to work hard on, like, every time I make a commitment and I keep it, I just lavish myself with praise, even if it's tiny, even if it's like, well, I write in the post, like, I'm not gonna have my edible until 5 p.m. And then I do it, and I'm like, the best. Look at you. You keep your commitments. You're a woman of integrity. You would ace the marshmallow test. You're incredible. And that's been helpful to me because, and this is part two, again, if I'm rewarding myself when I meet my commitments, and I'm not beating myself up when I don't, then I'm not as scared to notice and be real about when I meet my commitments and when I don't. I can see, like, oh, yeah, I said I was gonna, like, I quit smoking like a bunch of times. I started smoking cigarettes again in COVID. Not a good choice, but And then I quit a bunch of times. Pretty quickly after I started, I like started quitting, and then for 3 years, in the quitting, I think the longest was like maybe a week. Usually it was like hours to a day. um, and I would feel bad about that, and it eroded my trust in myself. But there was also an extent to which, like, I kind of I kind of knew that I was setting an intention. I had an ambition, and I think that it's been very helpful to me to differentiate between ambitions and intentions on the one hand and commitments on the other. I think it's okay to say, I would like to quit smoking, and I'm going to throw this pack away because I want to quit smoking. But recognizing that there's a difference between that and like, no, I'm done. Because for me, I remember I was just like, I gotta quit. Like, I gotta quit the whole time, obviously. But then I don't remember what exactly changed, but I was going on a trip to DC to go to a conference that I'd been to before, and I knew that either literally no one or very few people smoked. So I would have to like leave the conference to go smoke and come back smelling like smoke, and I have to buy cigarettes in DC because I was smoking a pack a day because I don't half-ass anything. And so I'd spend like $12 a day in DC because they're like 7 here in Huntsville last I checked. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to be out of my routines, which is the easiest time to start or stop a habit. I'm gonna be disincentivized from smoking anyway because of the cost and the circumstances. And this is just like the date. And so um I committed. I'm like, no, I'm gonna be done. Like, I'm not fucking around with this anymore after this like as soon as I get on that plane, like we're done. We're not a smoker anymore. And it was weeks, maybe months. I think it was weeks. Smoking a pack a day, going wild. I was probably smoking more than a pack a day because I knew my smoking days were numbered. And then I probably smoked a cigarette before I left. And I've had cigarettes since then, but I haven't been a smoker. Like, I've not, bought packs, kept them around. Um, I don't really think about cigarettes very much anymore. Thank God. That was the worst part of smoking, was how much time I spent thinking about cigarettes, thinking about quitting, thinking about feeling guilty about smoking, thinking about when I was going to have my next cigarette. Ugh, what a waste. So yeah, that's been helpful. Like, commitment versus intention versus ambition, like making that like, no, this is a commitment. And that knowing whether you're making a commitment or whether I'm making a commitment or setting an intention really has to do with like, how confident do I feel in my ability and my willingness to follow through. And that's fucking hard because it's hard to predict the future. People are very bad at even just predicting how they're going to feel under different circumstances, much less what they're going to do, much less what those circumstances are going to be. So keeping your commitments, you know, obviously the surest fire way to be a person of high integrity is just to never promise anything. But if you want to actually make commitments and keep them, it's difficult, and it's helpful. It's been helpful for me to be able to look back at my patterns and say like, okay, well, when I've half-assed quitting smoking, and I've just been sitting in my condo and I know that the store is a 7-minute walk, and um you know I know I'm just going to sit there and think about smoking the whole time, then this this quitting, doesn't have a super high likelihood of success based on how it's been in the past. And forgiving myself and patting myself on the back has helped me notice patterns and what I've been able to successfully, which commitments I've successfully met and which commitments I haven't, which helps me predict in the future which commitments when I should commit and when I should just be like, this is something I'd like to do. Um, and then when I notice, like, this is probably something I'm not, it's going to erode my confidence in myself to keep my own word to commit to this, then I don't more often. And so, yeah, I promise less, and that helps me um, have a higher hit rate, which increases my confidence. And it's a being a person of low integrity is a vicious cycle where you lose confidence in yourself and you aren't able to notice which under what circumstances you keep your commitments and it spirals. But I think being a person of high integrity is a virtuous cycle where you notice when I've noticed where I've had integrity and I've been able to build on that. I think. I don't know. Maybe all this is just, ma- you know, mental, emotional masturbation. And if you can't tell, I like thinking about myself and my behavior isn't any better, but I feel better about my behavior. So I think, did I even think I had low integrity before? I don't know, but I feel like I don't have a lot of anxiety about my level of integrity. I feel like I have more clarity about my level of integrity now. Um, I feel like I feel like there are opportunities where I could have made commitments that I haven't in the pursuit of maintaining trust in myself. And I feel good about that. Someday we're going to be mass surveilled and I'll be able to just roll the tape back. I'll be able to ask ChatGPT, what's my hit rate for integrity? And then it'll lie to me because that'll be more profitable for it to do. We know this is an unfair question, but what are men and women who are trying to attract other women doing wrong right now? They're not leaving their houses. Honestly, I think that's the biggest thing. I think, um, I think they're not leaving their houses and they're not hitting on each other. I think there's a big problem where, like, Me Too and just enlightened social mores and just the general, like, ugh, loneliness, atomization, erosion of social skills, a bunch of things have come together to dissuade. M The problem is it hasn't dissuaded all men or men equally from hitting on women. The men who we need to be worried about are not dissuaded. We talked about this before by Me Too. They are not dissuaded by the concept that they might make someone uncomfortable. They are not dissuaded by the fact that they are not skilled or smooth, that they can't read a room, that they might be making someone uncomfortable. They don't care. There is a percentage of the population who does not care, and none of those things have even slowed them down. I think those things have slowed down the people who do care, which is the exact opposite of the kind of person you want slowed down, and I think that's really unfortunate. Um, and it's a thing you really only learn by doing, and loneliness is self-reinforcing. So there's a really good book called Loneliness. It's got two authors. One of them is a really accomplished neuroscientist. The other was a journalist, and they wrote about how loneliness actually, like, changes your brain for the worse, that you become less able to accurately judge people's affective state. So, like, a lonely person, when they see another person's face, um, I think that's true. Interestingly, though, when they looked at brains of lonely people and less lonely people. The less lonely people weren't, like, markedly worse at determining other people's affective states, um, but they did tend to they were less confident in their ability to tell what people are thinking or how people were feeling, how they were making people feel, and they, were more likely to read neutral or positive affective states as negative, so they saw rejection where it didn't exist, and they were much more sensitive to that rejection. So that's just one way in which, like, loneliness reinforces itself. So again, we're into vicious and virtuous cycles. You've got to get it started to get out of the cycle to get not lonely, and it's difficult, and the longer you wait, the harder it is. And we don't talk about this. We don't train people on this. We used to not really have to, but I think we do now, and I wish we would. And I think, like, getting out of your house, being around. And the other thing is, be friends with people of all genders and orientations. Like, ideally, you would be friends with single women who you could either date some of them or date their friends. But even if you're not friends with single women, like, be friends with guys. They probably have friends who are single women. If none of your guy friends are friends with any single women, like, that's kind of not ideal. Maybe you need different guy friends. Um, yeah, I think a lot of these guys who are, like, perpetually single, um, I think a lot of them are, like, afraid of women. I think a lot of them don't like women. I think a lot of them think women are not gonna like them. And so, you know, make sure you like women and that women like you. And the best way to do that is to be friends with them. And the reality is that, like, you can have a meaningful, healthy, beautiful life without romance. Even if you're not asexual, even if you're a romantic person, if it just doesn't work out for you, like, we've been taught that romance is, like, central to life and the most important relationship, and I just don't believe that's true. Friends are it. Friends and family, a community. Like, you need tight bonds and loose connections. You need a network, you need a community, and you need that, like, core group of people who are ride or die and gonna be there for you, and you don't need to be having sex with any of them. And so, like, if you don't have anyone to date, probably you don't have the right friend group to introduce you to people you could date. So fix that. Fix that first and foremost. And if you get a date out of it, great. But, like, that is, to me, like, in my experience and from everything I've read, like, that is the thing to fix. And I think it's easier to fix that from that place, because if you come to somebody who you want to date, I mean, this is again from personal experience, and you say, like, you don't have to say it, it'll come off of you. I'm desperate. Like, I need community. I need connection. I need physical, mental, emotional support. That's not, to a healthy person, that's scary. And that's a red flag. Versus if you come to somebody who you're thinking about dating and you're like, I have a beautiful community that holds me, and that, I'm meeting their needs and they're meeting my needs, and my needs are met. I still have a desire for sex and romance, but these other needs have been met, and I know how to meet them, and I don't need you to do that for me. That's so much more attractive to a healthy person. Like, I think a healthy person requires that. A healthy person wants you to have that. And, if you come to them and you don't have it, then, hopefully they'll help you build, you guys can build it together. But anybody who doesn't mind that you don't have that, they're not for you, I don't think. So that's my advice, is to get all of your needs met. Sex and romance is not a need, it's a want. Connection, social connection, is a need. being in community is a need. Having people who have your back is a need. You have to have that to be healthy. Your brain literally shrinks and dies. Your body literally has a stress response when you don't have that. So, number one, baseline, like get that need met, and then having that base of your needs met is the place from which to go find love and sex. All right, people, ask me more questions, or I can, yeah, because I can talk about my other posts, I guess. I'm enjoying this more than I thought I would. Thanks for being here with me. Yeah, the last thing that really hit was, well, I did 4 things for understanding the state of gender, which did better than I thought it would. But then right before my last uh, AMA, I wrote man keeping, no, it's gender defending. It's crazy I'm still seeing takes on the man keeping New York Times article. I mean, I guess it makes sense. New York Times, they're good at it. They're good at their jobs. Um, yeah, I think man keeping is a I think the male loneliness crisis is real. I mean, people will say it's overblown, but like I've seen a lot of polling data to indicate it, and I think it makes sense with the way that men are socialized. It's very difficult to form and build and maintain close, intimate relationships and interdependence if you're not willing to be vulnerable, if you're not able to name and describe emotions other than anger and lust. um, if you feel like you need to compete, if you feel like all games are zero sum, if you uh, if you feel like you don't have worth if you're not a breadwinner, I think all that makes it really hard to get your emotional needs met and to meet other people's emotional needs. And I don't think that there's anything biological. I'm not going to say that there's nothing. I don't. I don't think it's. I don't think we should leave it down to biology that women tend to have more friends. Their friends tend to be with them regardless of whether or not they're in a romantic relationship. They tend to be closer to their friends. They tend to get more out of their non sexual relationships on average. I don't think the focus should be on biology. We don't know if there's a biological component, but we have very good reason to believe there's a very strong social component, and that's a thing we can actually do something about. So, you know, I think it's fine for the New York Times to like frame these issues in such a way as to get attention. I think like saying like masculinity harms men's ability to form and maintain healthy, close, intimate relationships is not as attention driving and spicy and discourse producing as man keeping. But I just wish that that would, they would, and this is kind of what I try to do is like, all right, say the thing that gets attention. But then once you have people's attention, use it as an opportunity to say something useful and nuanced. And that's what I wish that article could have done, is to not just kind of glance over the way that men are socialized against being in relationship, with people they're not having sex with. But, like, really go into it, really you don't even have to, like, it's you don't have to, like, explain every way in which this is the case, um, but at least just use the opportunity to state it explicitly, like, "This is gender," it's not that men are born broken, it's that we break them every day of their lives by making them perform masculinity or be threatened with violence. But I feel like people are starting to really understand that. Some people, maybe not New York Times writers, but people like Ruth Whitman, Celeste Davis, Christopher Pepper, Jeremy Moeller, a lot of Substackers. I mean, I'm sure people not on Substack, but I spend a lot of time on Substack, so that's where I'm noticing it. Any more questions? I haven't had I haven't had a lot of I haven't published a lot because I've been sick, so can't really talk about my recent writing. But I'm excited about the gambling piece. I think it'll be fun. I think it's just a good opportunity to, like, well, I don't it was interesting to, like, read about gambling because I feel like sports, gaming, gambling, which are all kinda very interrelated, like, it's not just that I don't have a penis and that people don't treat me like a man, it's also I don't know anything about these things, and they're apparently very big deals among especially young men. And so, yeah, I'm just extremely disconnected from, like, these major, cultural pillars in young male American life, and I think that's so interesting. There's these whole worlds that I just don't know anything about, and so, it was interesting to, like, learn about gambling and how many people are gambling. I hope you'll still read it, but, while I have you, I just wanna share some of the craziest things that I learned. I think the most, like, upsetting thing that I learned was that, according to my sources, the average Gen Z man who gambles, which obviously not all Gen Z men gamble, but of those who do, so this is someone who places a bet at least one bet per year, spends on average almost $2,000 per year on gambling, which is a lot. Um, but worse than that, this is significantly more than older gamblers spend in a year. And what's upsetting about this is that, first of all, Gen Zers make a lot less than older generations. So, as a percentage of their income, this is like a much larger percentage than for older gamblers. But then, this is this was crazy. Now, this is from NerdWallet, so I don't know if that matters, but it might. But almost a quarter of Gen Z gamblers see gambling as an investment. And this is compared with just 10% and 3% of Gen X and boomers, respectively. Millennials, millennial men, it's a millennial male gamblers, it's about the same. It's like 9% or 8%, I don't remember. And I think about this, I'm like, okay, because of the way compound interest works, if a Gen Z gambling man spent that or actually invested that $2,000 in just an index fund, $2,000 per year in an index fund, like, it would actually that's an actual investment, and it would really matter in a way that, like, if a boomer decided that for a boomer, gambling actually might be a better investment than an index fund. Um, so it's like the consequences of this misapprehension are so much greater for Gen Z. They have so much less wiggle room to be making these bad choices. And then the consequences, not just in the like missed income that they actually could have gotten if they'd invest, or wealth, I guess, that they could have gotten if they'd actually invested it, but also like the ramifications of those poor financial decisions for the rest of their lives. Um, Wild. Absolutely awful. Yeah. They're making me die on the inside. And then so this is part of my section on like, okay, porn versus gambling, like how much money are young men spending on each? And super stupidly and annoyingly, I could not find good survey data for how much the average person spends on pornography, or even how much the average person who spends money on pornography spends on pornography. But if you take the estimated size of the industry, which I've also looked for good numbers on that, and we really don't know, but based on the numbers we have, which seem to be just kind of vibes, um, when you divide it by the number of people who look at pornography in a year, again, we can't do it by the people who spend money on it, but by the people who just admit to looking at it, it averages out to about $200 per user per year. So for users, people who look at porn and people who gamble, it's a tenfold difference in what they're spending on average. So like I'd have to be wrong. I'd have to be off by 10 times for it to even match. That's how much gambling is a bigger problem than pornography in terms of what people are spending, how much money people are spending on it. Um, more people look at porn, so porn, I guess, if you think all usage is bad, then porn is a bigger problem. Gambling is worse. Addictiveness, oh my fucking Lord, there's no contest. Like, gambling is way more addictive than pornography. I mean, first of all, pornography is not addictive by, if you addiction is a little bit squishy. Like, it's it's not quite as bad as like what is a cult, but it's similar in that like it's a little bit arbitrary where you set the cutoff and on what basis for when something goes from like a pleasurable hobby to an addiction. But yeah, there is no scientific consensus around the existence of porn addiction. Like, the things that you would look at, it's causing me financial problems. It's causing me problems in my life. I'm doing it despite obvious harms, stuff like that. I've spent my life savings. It it doesn't happen enough that there's even like a scale to measure it. The only thing that they have to measure quote unquote porn addiction is the problematic pornography use, which is basically like a questionnaire that boils down to, I feel like I have a problem with pornography. It doesn't look at like, what are the actual effects on your life? It's more just like, do you think you have a problem with pornography? Um, and So yeah, gambling addiction is unlike porn addiction, quite real, quite measurable, and very common. Yeah, let's see. In one survey, 10% of all young American men are problem gamblers. Um, Also, when it comes to usage, men use porn and gamble more than women. But with gambling, it's much more skewed toward young men than older men, and particularly for online gambling and sports gambling and online sports gambling, it's very young and male. Versus pornography, actually, men 20 to 30 is the demographic who is most likely to use porn. Um, in another survey, 21% of all US voters reported at least one problematic gambling behavior. Again, this is not 21% of gamblers, it's 21% of voters. Um, in another survey, 68% of voters who admitted to online sports betting admitted to at least one problematic gambling behavior. 53% admitted to two or more. So half of people who are gambling online on sports have two or more measurable pro- problems, like it's causing them measurable problems in their life. Um, so obviously porn is worse on that measure. And then like the saddest part is the worst case outcomes. Like the worst case outcomes for porn is like you waste a lot of time and your dick gets chafed. The worst case scenarios for gambling addiction is suicide. Um, People lose their houses. People get injured. It's Gambling and suicide are very tightly linked. Gambling may be the addiction disorder with the highest suicide rate, uh, high rates of bankruptcy. Yeah, yeah, it's a big problem, and yeah, there's just no reality in which it's even in the same category as pornography. Like online gambling, like could actually be considered by objective measures a public health crisis. Like that actually might be. Um, I don't say that because I'm necessarily advocating for bans or regulation or, a legal approach, a governmental approach to gambling. I really don't know. I've barely thought about gambling. I think gambling is really boring. Yeah, I've been to Vegas. I go to shows and I used to drink and I would drink and sit by the pool, but I just think gambling is so damn boring and a tax on the stupid. Um, but having looked at the data, it's a thing, and yeah, I don't know what to do about it, but I'm even more like it makes absolutely no sense for us to be even talking about porn when we have gambling right here. Gambling is right here. um, yeah, I'm increasingly on the JS Mill vibe of gambling should be legal, but advertising it shouldn't. Yeah, I saw that something about like what percentage of young men had been exposed to ads for gambling, and I don't think you're allowed. I don't think we're allowed to advertise pornography on non-pornographic websites. I don't remember ever seeing an ad for a porn site. No, I've seen ads for Pornhub, but honestly, not online. I've seen like billboard. Maybe I've seen billboards for Pornhub online, but I don't remember seeing like pop-up ads or banner ads for porn. I don't know if that's illegal or just frowned on or the payment provider. I don't know. Maybe I've seen them and I just don't remember. But yeah, no, half of YouTube seems to be sponsored by online gambling, and YouTube skews very male and very young. And it, maybe this is the place for stigma. I don't know. I'm not sure. Uh but if we're going to do something about something, I'd do it about gambling and not porn. That's just me. All right, my friends. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sticking around. All of Instagram is ads for OnlyFans. Well, that's true. Guilty. uh, that's true. Uh, and some of YouTube. I'm on YouTube as well. Thank you so much. Uh, I'm sorry that Gwen wasn't able to join us. She loves doing it, so if her health holds up, she'll definitely be here next week, or at least in future times. She does love it, and I know she missed y'all tonight, and I know you missed her, but I hope that I was a poor substitute, and that you enjoyed yourself, and thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you guys next week.